Hi everybody, and Happy New Year! I'd like to welcome Sven Arnesen to the studio, and maybe Sven, you would like to tell us a little about yourself and how you got into this kiting thing.
Well, thank you, and yes sir, that would be a pleasure. Like you said, my name is Sven Arnesen. I'm a passionate kite flyer and, as you might know, the webmaster of the AERIALIS Kites website. And here's a bit about myself and how I started my journey in the world of kiting. You know, as a kid, I did my fair share of making and, well, trying to fly kites, but it never really came to anything more than that. And for many years, kiting played absolutely no role whatsoever in my life. But in the summer of 1998, I picked up a couple of cheap stunters while on vacation in a windy Denmark. I spent a few hours on a windswept piece of beach, having big fun with these kites and the wind, and yeah, the spark, it was definitely lit. However, when I got back to my neck of the woods, I couldn't get those kites to fly. What was wrong? Why wouldn't these kites fly in the light winds at my place? Was I doing something wrong? So I took to the internet again and soon found that kiting was bigger than I thought. Much bigger. I mean, much, much bigger. And that it probably would be a very good idea to spend a bit more money and buy a proper stunt kite. So I soon found Øystein Høyland's online kite store, Sportsdragespecialisten. Yeah, the sport kite expert. And before you could even spell Visa, I'd ordered an HQ session. While waiting for the kite to arrive, I read everything, well, almost, on Wreck Kite's news group and the Peter's kite site, preparing for that initial flight. And finally, the postman dropped off the kite at the local post office. I picked it up and headed straight to the nearest flying field. And wow, what a revelation. Now this was a real kite, and nothing like the two cheap ones I bought in Denmark. You know, the sail made of proper ripstop nylon, not Icarex though, but yeah. The frame of carbon fiber rods, glass fiber standoffs, proper and solid fittings, and yeah, guess what? A bridle that actually was symmetrical. So I flew the kite until it was so dark I couldn't see a thing, and I was hooked. The rest is, as they say, history. And if you point your preferred web browser to the AERIALIS Kites website, you can join in on that never-ending journey of kite flying of mine. I really hope to see you both there, and hopefully also on the field when the world is getting back to a somewhat more normal state again.
Alright, now let's talk a little about zero wind flying, because this is what it's all about, right? What makes zero wind flying unique to other than having no wind?
Well, I guess my first reaction to indoor flying was pretty much like the average Joe's, you know. Yeah, right, indoor flying. You gotta be kidding me, eh? What kind of fans do you use? But I soon found that there were a couple of nerds actually flying their kites indoors, using nothing but their body language to create the wind required. Yeah, I know. I fall into that category of nerds too, so I just had to take a closer look at it. And once again, thanks to the internet, I started to investigate the phenomenon. I even found a handful of lousy quality videos kind of proving that indoor flying actually could be possible. But way back then, I didn't have any zero wind kites, but a dear friend of mine, Anders Mattsson. Hi Anders! He had a few. So I invited him up to my place, asked him to bring his indoor kites, and I booked a local indoor tennis court for the weekend. And wow, what a blast! You know, flying in zero wind was just incredible. When there's absolutely no wind, you must do all the work yourself. You must create, you know, the wind yourself by moving around on the ground. And that was a total game changer for me. I guess I learned more about how kites fly that weekend than years out on the flying field. You see, flying indoors on a really short set of lines, 3-4 meters maybe, 10-15 feet, you get the kite, you get it up close. And being that close to the kite, you really get to see what's going on. How it reacts to any move you make, quick moves, slow moves, right moves, the wrong moves. What impact the wind you create yourself have on your kite. The pressure in the sail, how the kite glides, how it turns, how it spins, how the bridle plays depending on your input. All those details are revealed. And I like to say that rather than fly your kites indoors, it's more like you're guiding them in the air. Too much and you'll just end up yanking the kite out of the air. But using a more subtle input, you can have your kite do the most graceful of moves. And of course, after a while, when you kind of get the hang of things, you can crank it up a little and go for a more aggressive flying style. Because I think it's pretty cool when you combine those soft and smooth moves with a more aggressive kind of trick flying. So, to cut a long story short, for me, the uniqueness of zero wind flying is that really strong connection to the kite. Me and my kite, we kind of become one.
So, flying in zero wind for years, do you have a favorite kite for flying in such condition, and why?
My favorite kite. Wow. Now that's a tough one. Yeah, you're right. I've flown quite a few indoor or zero wind kites throughout the years, and they all come with their own special twists. Of course, I could go for the Sweetie by German Siebert's Drachenkiste. It's a smaller and very sturdy, easy to fly indoor kite. Great bang for the bucks, and the perfect kite for introduction to zero wind flying. Or what about the Double Zero by French Atelier? That's another little indoor kite capable of doing all, or at least most of the tricks in that famous book. It's no beginner's kite though. Maybe the Inner Space by UK-based Benson Kites. It's definitely a candidate with its super gracious gliding characteristics and a pretty fragile frame. The iTricks. Yet another very affordable little trickster from Siebert's Drachenkiste. And this little guy, it's the only kite I've ever done comets with in absolutely zero winds. Yeah, I could even repeat them. No. It's gotta be the Feather. That's my all-time favorite indoor kite. I think it's originally designed by Christoph Focken, but mine, this one, is produced by German HQ Kites. As you can see, it's pretty conservative in its color scheme, mostly white, but with a few panels in contrasting black and purple. 4mm carbon rods in the leading edges, and the upper spreader, and originally AVI skinnies for the lower spreaders. However, after a little mishap, ending up in breaking both of the original lower spreaders, mine, this one, is now equipped with two Skyshark 2PTs, and they work like a charm. But why did it all boil down to this kite, the Feather, you might ask? Well, here's the story. Because you can see, it's not the most expensive zero wind kite you'll find, and it's definitely not the most trickable. It's not the kite with the most flashy colors or fancy graphics, or it's not the kite with that really intricate active bridle or innovative details. But it's the kite that really opened the door to zero wind or indoor flying to me. Do you remember I told you that I invited Anders Mattsson up to my place to try out indoor flying? Well, one of the kites he brought was a white, purple and black feather. And that's the very first kite I ever flew indoors. And that's the very kite I fly in my video for this year's virtual Windless Festival too. And I think that's the kite I've flown on all my indoor flying sessions in between. Because when Anders left for home, this feather stayed with me. Thank you, Anders. Yeah, I have of course flown a bunch of other kites indoors too. Even the Thor's Hammer, the big German level 1 kite. But I always seem to go back to the feather because, well, I just love how it flies. And you can fly it slow and gracefully. You can make it spin so flat on its belly. 540s, and helicopters, they're so smooth. And it's stable. and it's floaty on its back too, and it can hold a fade forever. I actually once put it into fade, staked my lines to the ground, went over to a kiosk and bought myself a drink, got back to the kite, and it was still sitting there in that solid fade. Picked up the lines and continued to fly. Yeah, that was outdoors. So, when flying the feather, I surely get into that bubble, when you really connect with your kite, and yeah, you should really try it yourself,
Finally, you've been kiting for quite some years now, and I'm pretty sure you have a lot of memories from your flying. Would you please like to share one of those special memories with us?
Well, of course I can. If you've been to the AERIALIS Kites website, you might have noticed its slogan, "Just fly." And there's actually a story behind it, and it goes like this. In May 2005, Roger Tessa-Gabassi of Arsky invited the AERIALIS team flyers to the Freestyle World Cup in Cap d'Agde in France. We were delighted, and of course we accepted the invitation, and soon we found ourselves at the great beach of the French tourist village. The weather was absolutely perfect. We left the chilly temperatures of the Scandinavian spring and faced smooth onshore winds and mercury climbing well into the 20s, which translates well into the 70s, I think, Fahrenheit. For the first couple of days, we practiced in close to immaculate conditions on the beach. We were getting our team routine looking pretty good, and I was also practicing my solo routine with the music banging in my ears. We were all really enjoying the moment and having an absolutely great time on the beach that slowly but surely started to fill up with other pilots from almost all corners of the world. So, finally, the big day, competition day, and the conditions changed dramatically. The smooth onshore breeze was gone and replaced by a hilarious Mistral wind coming from the inland, rolling over the seaside buildings and making havoc on the flying field. I won't go into details about the competition. Other than the AERIALIS team flyers, we ended up, well, how shall I put it? The best four-man team. And I didn't qualify for the second round of the individual competition, but regardless of the result, the whole thing was a great experience, and the memories just piled up as the days went by. And there was this out-of-this-world pilot, a little French guy who could create magic with his nirvana, no matter what Mother Nature threw at him. Dead calm, turbulent Mistrals, he never seemed to care, because he just flew. I remember specifically one afternoon, he was at the point of the beach sticking out into the sea. And these ballistics wind all over the place, blowing sand and making havoc. He didn't seem to care at all out there on nailing those perfect two-point landings, one after the other. And he never seemed to stop. It was jaw-dropping. In such terrible conditions, he just flew. And he did it to perfection. And during one of its solo performances in the competition arena, the wind just died down. Completely. It was dead. And he was about to start the backspin part of his routine. He stayed focused. Despite the complete lack of wind, he flipped his nirvana over into a fade, started running in a big circle in the arena while pumping backspins over his shoulder. He just flew. I was in awe. I could hardly believe what I'd just seen. It shouldn't be possible, but he did it. And that was a huge inspiration to watch him perform. Flying his kite to perfection no matter the conditions. And his flying made a great impression on me, and I've tried to implement some of his attitude into my own flying and mindset. No, you cannot change the conditions, but you can adapt and just fly. Yeah, the pilot was Richard Debray, by the way.
All right. Thank you, Sven. That about wraps up this interview. I hope you've all enjoyed it, and please keep on watching all the other videos submitted to the virtual Windless Kite Festival too. See ya!